Hi, Mitch.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, so nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. My pleasure. Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you. I'm a huge Mitch Albom fan. Huge.
Is that right?
Oh, yes. The Little Liar I've given that book to so many people. It is one of my favorite books. It takes such a dark subject matter. And I don't know if this was your intention, but the way that I read it was almost like a fable. Like you were talking about something that really happened, but managed to make it more digestible, and it was beautiful and everything. I mean, this book is so beautiful too. His new book is called Twice. It comes out on October 7th. And this is a very interesting subject matter. Mitch Albom has written, I think, 8 #1 New York Times bestsellers. I'm right behind you, Mitch, by the way. I have 6 #1 New York Times bestsellers. But mine are more memoirs, and yours...
I'm sure you'll pass me very quickly.
Well, I don't know. 42 million copies. I don't think I'm anywhere close to that. I mean, I have a very specific personality type and appeal, and yours is much vaster. So we're going to get into this book. But you tend to write... some, like Tuesdays with Morrie, which was one of the most, or maybe the most successful book of all time, wasn't necessarily, it was memoir-ish, whereas Twice and The Little Liar, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, right? That book I actually haven't read yet. I'm going to read that on my flight to New York this week. That's one of your books that I need to read. How do you decide what you're going to do? I mean, I know the story with Tuesdays with Morrie, right? You were kind of doing that for Morrie.
Yeah, Tuesdays with Morrie was an accident. I was just going to visit an old professor of mine who was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease, and one visit turned into another, and we ended up doing kind of a last class together and what's important in life once you know you're going to die. But there was never supposed to be a book. It was just a series of visits. And then at one point during these visits, he told me that his biggest fear was that when he died, his family was going to go broke and they were going to have to sell the house, and because they didn't have the money to pay for his bills. So I got the idea to, try to put a book together and see if I could raise enough money for him to pay his bills. And everywhere I went, everybody turned me down. Everybody. They said it was a stupid idea, that I was a sports writer, that it would be depressing, that I didn't know how to write a book like that. And I probably would have given up on it, except that, I was trying to do something for somebody else, which is kind of one of the points of the book. And so I kept pushing. I found one publisher who was willing to do it 3 weeks before Morrie died, and gave us just enough money to pay his bills. And I gave Morrie all the money and said, here, you don't have to worry about when you die. And that was kind of, for me, that was sort of the end of the, journey. I had finally kind of grown up a little bit at age 37 and had done something nice for somebody else instead of just my own career. And I was going to go back to sports writing. And I just wrote this very small little book that wasn't supposed to sell. They printed 20,000 total copies, I think, for the world. And then, the world had different ideas. And people took to that book, and it grew into something that I never could have imagined. And it kind of pinballed my career, particularly in writing, in a whole different direction. And so then from that point, it was, well, what am I going to do next? And it led to a lot of other things.
So talk to me a little bit about the impact of that book and about how you received all of that.
It wasn't expected. And I'd never written a book like that. I was in sports. And so I sent it to a friend of mine, Amy Tan, who's the writer of the Joy Luck Club, who I'd known before that. And I said, listen, you write books like this. I don't, is this any good? And she read it and she wrote me back. She said, all right, I'm going to tell you 2 things. 1, it's a good book, and I think a lot of people are going to read it. And number 2, you're about to become everybody's rabbi. I did not know what she meant, but I do now. And so you say, how did I receive it? I went from being the guy that people would stop in airports because I was on ESPN, and they would say, hey, sports guy, who's going to win the Super Bowl? And you could just say, Patriots, and get in the escalator and go up. And then all of a sudden, I became the guy that people would say, hey, my mother died of cancer, and the last thing we did was read Tuesdays with Morrie together, and can I talk to you about her, and can I show you a picture? And, you can't just go Patriots and go up the escalator.
Right.
You have to stop and you have to talk. And that's been my life ever since. And And I'm not complaining about it. Quite the contrary. It's sensitized me in a way to people that I never would have had otherwise. And it's made me realize what's really going on in people's minds, even if they're strangers passing you by in an airport. And my concerns became kind of different, and my interests became different. And so when it came time to write another book, I wasn't interested really in sports books anymore. And I took to novel writing mostly because I was too scared to write anything after Tuesdays with Morrie in nonfiction, because I thought everybody would just keep saying, well, where's Morrie? How come Morrie's not in it? And so I said, well, I'll just go the whole other direction and just start writing fiction. And they told me I was an idiot for doing that. But I said, well, that's what you told me for Tuesdays with Morrie. So you weren't right then. Maybe you won't be right again. And that was the 5 people you meet in heaven. And that kind of launched my fiction writing career.
Wow. Who knows what other skills you have up your sleeve that you don't even know about? I mean, you've been a successful sports writer, a successful nonfiction writer, and now a successful fiction writer. I mean, we don't even know what else you could be capable of.
Well, who knows? Probably very little.
Maybe a professional ballerina. Or I think it's a ballerino, actually, if it's a male ballerina. Okay, so 5 people you meet in heaven. How did you conceptualize that? Like, obviously, you're taking a big risk, because in the writing world, I understand, like anything, I think, professionally, once you get put in one, corner, people want to keep you there, and they want you to keep producing what was the most successful. So, how did you conceptualize the 5 people you meet in heaven?
Well, it's funny you asked that. And one of the reasons I was interested in talking to you is because I feel that you probably have endured the same thing. You probably been told, well, you're a stand-up comic, so you can't host a show. You host a show, so you can't host a podcast. You host you can't. And I was certainly told that, after Tuesdays with Morrie, which nobody wanted, then all anybody wanted was Wednesdays with Morrie. And every time I went into a publisher, they would say, yeah, but, give us another Morrie book. And I said, I don't have any more Morrie books. I said everything I had to say, but I do have this idea for this novel. And the idea of the novel was that I wanted to write about people who feel that they don't matter. And so I came up with this idea based on an old uncle of mine who had told me a story about he had a near-death experience where he had died and he had seen all his relatives waiting for him at the edge of his bed before he kind of came back into his body and lived again. And I always had this idea that that's what happens when you die. And so I came up with this idea that there would be this old guy, kind of like my uncle, World War II vet, who died trying to save a little girl from an accident at a pier where he worked, an amusement park. And a cart falls and he goes to push her out of the way and he feels these 2 little hands in his, her hands, and then he dies and he doesn't know if he saves her or not. And he goes to heaven and he finds out that the first stage of heaven is you meet 5 people from your life, each of whom was in your life for some reason. Maybe you knew them, maybe you didn't know them. Maybe it was a relative, maybe it was someone you spent 2 minutes with. But in some way they changed your life and you changed their life forever. And with each person he meets, he finds out that he was very significant, and that this is something that he did that they didn't think mattered, change this and change that, change that. And he keeps asking them, well, what happened at the end of my life? I felt these 2 little hands in my hands, did I push the girl out of the way? Did I save her? Did I save her? And nobody can tell him until the end. And the last person that he meets is a little girl who he was responsible for killing during the war, and he never knew about it. And he says, after she tells him and he breaks down and she tells him, he says to her, but did I save the little girl? Just tell me, was my life worth something? Did I push her out of the way? And she says, no, you pulled her, and he says, well, no, I felt her hands. And she says, no, those were my hands and I was bringing you to heaven. And the reason that I tell you that story is because when I went around to different publishers to tell them the story of 5 people you meet in heaven, I went to this one place called Hyperion, and it was the only place that was willing to listen to me about writing a novel. Everyone else just wanted Wednesdays with Morrie. And they said, well, we'll hear your story. What is it? And I told him the story, and I got to that point where he says, the little girl says to him, those were my hands and I was bringing you to heaven. And a woman in the room burst into tears. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. So, and I said, no, it's okay. So they said to me, we want this book. We don't want Wednesdays with Morrie. We want this book. This is going to be a really good book. So I left that meeting and I went and got in the elevator with my literary agent. And I said, okay, two things. Number one, let's sign with this company because they were willing to do a novel and they want to do it. And number two, whoever that woman was, I want her to be my editor. And that woman became my editor for the next 4 books that I wrote. And she always joked around that was the luckiest cry that she ever ever had.
I love that story.
Awesome. Yeah, so.
I mean, Wednesdays with Morrie is it's so emblematic. First of all, Morrie's dead, so I don't know what Wednesdays with Morrie would look like. It's so emblematic of our creative worlds, like the people, the decision makers in creative lands. And another thing that in you telling us that story reminds me of is my favorite quote of all time, which is, "It doesn't matter how many people say no, you just need one person." All you need is one person, and everyone gets so fixated on the rejection in any sort of creative endeavor, and on a larger scale in any endeavor. People get so hung up on the rejection, and it doesn't matter how many people don't get you. It just matters that somebody does, and somebody gives you the green light to go ahead with your creative ideas. So this is another example of that being so true. And yeah, I love that. I mean, I almost burst into tears. Listen, now I'm like, do I have to read the book? But I will read the book because I just love your writing so much. Let's talk about The Little Liar. How does I'm so curious as to how you create these kinds of ideas for the books, because your books are so disparate. Like each one is so different than the next. And how does one come up with that? Like the concept of lying and how a lie can spread and change the course of history.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that my books are different one from the other is because I tend not to approach writing, certainly not novels, the way that most people do. Most of my writer friends, they come up sort of with a plot. They've got an idea that this is going to happen or a couple characters going to do this. I never do that. I always try to come up with a theme and that I want to write about. And then once I say, okay, I'm really interested in that theme, then I try to create a story around that theme. And that's probably why every story sort of comes out different. So the 5 People You Meet in Heaven, the theme was that people who don't think they matter should find out that everybody matters. And then I created a whole heaven and everything around that because it served the theme. The Little Liar, I went to a Holocaust museum in Israel on a book tour about 10 years ago, and went into this Yad Vashem. It's the really big Holocaust museum that they have there. And on the walls are all these videos of people that were collected a lot by Steven Spielberg, I think, when he was making Schindler's List. And they just run constantly. They're always running. It's just people recollecting different moments about the Holocaust. And one of them I stood in front of, and this woman, it was an older woman, and she was saying, everybody always asks me, why did we get on those trains when they knew that where they were going to concentration camps and we were going to be murdered? Why didn't we fight back? And she said they don't understand that we were lied to, that they would use Jewish people to lie to us and to tell us that we were going to new jobs or new homes. And that's how they got us onto the trains. And these Jewish people, they only lied to us because they were being threatened themselves that their families would be killed if they didn't do what they said. And I always thought, wow, there's got to be some kind of story there, because what a terrible, war is awful and Holocaust is awful, but then to make your own people, lie to their own people and lead them to their deaths. How would you live with telling that lie? But it seems so dark to me, Chelsea, it's like, God, I'm getting depressed just even thinking about that. Who's going to want to read that? And then about a couple of years ago, I said, what if I told that story? Because I wanted to write something about the truth. Because I think it's pretty obvious that in the last couple of years, truth has become a relative term, and it really does affect the world, no matter what your particular view of it is. If you can't trust the things that you're hearing or people that you're hearing them from, it changes everything.
Well, I think you said it right there, what your view of it is. Mm-hmm. There shouldn't be different views of the truth. The truth is the truth. Yeah. But now there's multiverses, as we were talking about.
Right. So I thought, what if I make it that it's a kid instead of an adult who would know better? What if it's a kid who's never told a lie before in his life, and he gets tricked into telling his own people that it's okay to get on these trains? And how would he live with that? And that's when I knew I had a book, and I started exploring it. And that's what happens to little Nico in this story, that he's never told a lie before. He's Greek. He lives in this Greek village, and he's known for just being a kid who can't tell a lie. And the first lie that he tells is when a Nazi tricks him into telling the people on the trains that everything's going to be okay and get on the trains. And he does this for 3 weeks until the last day. He sees his own family being put in one of these train cars, and he runs to want to join them, and the Nazi doesn't let him go. And he says, but I want to go with them. I want to go to the new jobs and the new homes. And the Nazi says, there are no new homes, you stupid Jew, and in that moment, he realizes that he's told a lie, and his family is sent away, and he's left behind. And from that point forward, he can never tell the truth again. He becomes this pathological liar, which seems to me, Chelsea, I don't know, that seemed to me like that would be kind of the natural thing that would happen. Your mind would so explode that truth would just become almost poison, because of look at what happens with it. And he becomes this pathological liar, and it follows him and his family and this girl who loves him for the next 30, 40 years on their different paths. It was a really hard book to write. Because every day you're immersed in. I mean, you have to write as a Nazi. It's. I don't ever want to imagine that I could know what's in the head of a Nazi, but I had to, and so it was exhausting. And when I finished it, I was proud of it, and I was glad that I wrote. I always wanted to write one book for Holocaust literature, to contribute to that. I think it's important that that's not forgotten. But I didn't want to write, the such and such of Auschwitz, A lot of books have been done this similarly. And so I wanted to come up with an original idea, and I think I did. And I'm very pleased and honored that you think that that's a good book. It means a lot to me.
And you fictionalize like Nazis. You fictionalize Hitler in the book instead of calling him by his name. Why do you do that? Just under the umbrella of fiction?
No, I didn't want his name in any of my books.
Okay.
So I just referred to him as the Wolfe, which is how he referred to himself.
Right.
Actually, everything in The Little Liar is historically accurate. Everything except the characters who I invented and put in. I researched the hell out of that book. I went to Thessalonica and met with a bunch of people and saw even the house that he lives in is a real address in that city, because I just wanted it to ring. Trying to make up something during the Holocaust will never be as poignant or as moving as basing stuff off of real things that happened, because in that period of time, the real things that happened were just so moving and so horrifying and so inspirational in some ways. Even the moment where his grandfather, all the family is in the concentration camp in Auschwitz, and the grandfather every night makes them all gather together and pray and say thank you for whatever they had during the day. And you can imagine, what can people say? How can you say thank you for anything when you're in a concentration camp? And he makes them go around, everyone in the family, and one of them will say, I'm thankful that I got an extra spoonful of soup. And one says, the guard who always beats me was off today, so I didn't get beaten. And one says my rotted tooth fell out of my mouth. And one says, I saw a bird, and just that notion of having hope, even under the most dire of circumstances. You can't make that stuff up. I read about moments like that in listening to survivors talk or tapes of survivors talk, and just kind of created my own thing that was parallel to theirs. But trying to create it from whole cloth is foolish. That the stuff that happened is so inspirational. You might as well use it as your inspiration.
And what is your process like? What does it mean when you're going to sit down and write a book? And what does that mean to your family? Like, are you gone?
Yeah, means bye-bye. Yeah. My wife and all my family kind of know when I'm in a book mode. I kind of just walk around with a glassy expression for the better part of 8 or 9 months. And my wife has to repeat things to me many times. But my process isn't as dramatic as I think people like to imagine it. I just get up in the morning and come down here where I am, it's my office, and just sit down very, very first thing. I don't read anything. I don't listen to anything. I don't turn on a computer or television. I want a fresh head, and I find that I only really have that when I first wake up.
Yeah.
And I just write for the next 2.5, 3 hours maybe, and then that's it. And I could sit there for another 8 hours, but nothing's going to come. And so I've learned that, you go until your tank is empty, and then you come back and do it again. I do always try to end on a positive, like if I'm in the middle of a good paragraph or something, I stop myself, because I find like when you wake up in the next morning, you look forward to coming down and working on it if you left it someplace good. But if you left it in the middle of a really bad paragraph, then you're going to just stay in bed.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
So have you ever read the book, or it's not really, well, it is a book, Daily Rituals? Have you ever seen that book? Where it talks about writers' processes. It's all these different famous painters, sculptors, artists, writers, creators, creatives, and what they do. And it talks about the first few hours of each day. And then it talks about how you need a physical break. You need some sort of exercise, food. And then like people like Hemingway would, get shit-faced at 2:30 in the afternoon, come back and start writing again after their walk and to the bar and back. But so many people, I mean, it's very well researched that the first few hours of your day are your most creative and where you have the freshest ideas. But I love the idea of not looking at anything when you sit down. That's fresh advice.
I'll tell you the other really good piece of advice I got with regard to writing came when I was really, really young, and I was just starting out. I was in New York, and I had been a musician, and I was kind of transitioning out of being a musician. And I got a job writing for a TV Shopper magazine that they would give out in the supermarkets. But they would have a feature story on the cover, which is really embarrassing. I look back on it because I would call people saying, "Hi, I'm Mitch Albom. I'm writing for TV Shopper, and I'd like to interview you." I can't believe. And they wanted famous people would agree to be interviewed to be on the TV Shopper magazine, and one of them was this photographer whose name escapes me, but it was kind of like Scavullo, he's really well known back then. And I went and interviewed him, and he said, I somehow asked him, how did you get started? What's your process or something like that? He said, well, when I was really young, there was a photographer like me, well known and everything, and I really respected him. So I took a bunch of pictures, and I sent my best stuff, and I sent it off to him and asked if he could give me any advice. He said, I waited, and about 3 months later, I got an envelope back with my pictures and a note. And the note said, it's obvious to me that you've mastered the basics of good photography. Now, surround yourself with the best music, the best art, the best books, the best film, and everything else will take care of itself. And that was it. That was the total advice that he had. And he said, I found that to be, at first I thought it was kind of flippant, but then I found it to be true, because there's an osmosis that takes place if you do surround yourself with other things. A lot of writers think, well, all I should do is just read. A lot of musicians think that all I should do is just, play. But there's an osmosis that takes place with other forms of art that I think sink into you and affect you. My having been a musician, I find is a great asset in writing, because I write with a rhythm. And I can tell what the paragraph isn't working, because I can kind of I write like this. And if I stop, and I find, well, my head's not shaking anymore. Must be, this isn't working, and then I'll change something, and then I'll go back. Oh, I got it back again, So there's a lot of cross influence from the different arts. And I thought that was a good piece of advice too.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so we're going to take a break with Mitch Albom, and we'll be right back. And we're back with Mitch Albom. Okay, so let's talk about this newest book, Twice, which is another great concept, which is the theme of this book is this young boy he finds out very early on in his life, as his mother is about to pass away, that he has the ability to redo things, but he doesn't have the ability to redo them twice. He can only redo them once. I mean, he can do it twice, but he can't go back and
infinite,
fix.
yeah.
Right. So at a certain point, there was a point in the book where I was confused, because he goes so far back, so he's redoing things that he's already redone, right? How do you square that? Because at one point he goes all the way back many, many years, and he's already redone so many things along the way. Break
that's
that down.
one of the problems. One of the problems when you create a magical world is then you have to live by your rules.
Yeah, exactly.
and you keep saying, well, what are the rules here again? And then at some point you realize, like, you know what? I created the rules. I'm just gonna write it, and everyone will have to go along with it. But yeah, that's the premise of the story, is that he has the power to do anything in his life again, but only one time, and he has to live with the consequence of the second time. So if, for example, he misses a shot to end the game, a basketball game, and he goes back to take that same shot again, and that time he gets hit in the jaw and breaks his jaw. He can't go back to the first one and say, I'll just take missing the shot. He has to live with the broken jaw going forward. And the presumption is that everything else that happens going forward sort of happens the same way that it happened before, that he can't really undo any of those things. But the idea of it was to address, again, like the theme, like I've told you, I just try to find a theme. This theme was about the grass is always greener concept, and as you get older, you run into a lot of people, and you become a person who starts saying, boy, if I could have done this again, my whole life would have been different. Or if I only could have if I hadn't done that it would be different. And I wanted to really explore that and see if it really isn't necessarily better or worse. And then as I was going along, I said, well, the thing that seems to be the one that people talk about the most or fantasize about the most is love. What if I had married somebody else? What if I had married that guy who asked me and I turned him down? Or what if I had gone on that date with that girl that, I was too scared to? Or, what if? There's all those things, but we always think we can do better, or, our true love is someplace else. And I wanted to sort of explore that idea. So that's what motivated me to write twice.
Was that personal at all?
Well, not in a way. I mean, I've been married once and
no, not related to your marriage. Let's not get you into trouble here. But just in your life, or obviously that's something that comes up. Like, if you could, I always get that question in every interview. Is there anything you regret? And it's like, well, if I sat down and thought about everything I fucking regretted, we'd be here for hours. I'd rather not think about it. I didn't do it, so I'm here now. And while reading this book, which is it's such a fucking awesome book. And, these books are so, they're like nugget sized.
Yeah.
They're a nice, they
like
are
a perfect Saturday afternoon read.
Yeah, just a perfect everything.
Mm-hmm.
I just love them. And this is like 300 pages, but you whip through these books so quickly. Our listeners are big readers, so I just want everyone to know how passionate I am. But when I do think about the possibility, like, if, I always had this fantasy, if I could just be a straight A student, from like kindergarten through high school, and actually apply myself and really just been like, and then I would have been the prom queen and all of these things. I always used to think that when I was in my 20s, like, if I could have just made my parents, been like this model child. And now when I think about the idea of that, it's like, I don't want to go through all of that garbage again. I don't want to go through that life again, because then you have to put up with all of the ugliness also. You have to re-experience all of the times where you were sick or someone died or all of those types of things. And it's like, I don't want to. What is your viewpoint after having written something like this? What do you think about that? Like, if you had the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I had that viewpoint before I even wrote it. And that is, people have asked me the same question, Chelsea, is there anything that you would redo? And I think for some reason, they think the person who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie is going to answer, oh, absolutely not. Everything that I've done has been, has been for a purpose. And my answer is absolutely. I'll give you like 20 things right now that I would do differently if I had a chance to do them differently. But if you said to me, you have to unlearn everything that you learned from the mistake that you made, then I would say no, because all of the mistakes and all of the regrets and all the things that I did that I would do differently if I was at that moment again have taught me the things that I have learned now, and have shaped me into the person I am now. I'll give you a perfect example. And one that I like, talk about it twice in a lifetime opportunity. So when my wife and I got married, we got married kind of late, age-wise, and
how old were
we didn't
you?
have kids. I was 37, she was 39.
Okay.
And And we didn't have kids, and I kind of delayed it, I mean, I delayed getting married. I delayed having kids. I was really into my career at that time. And then Tuesdays with Morrie happened, and that was all going on. And she really wanted to have kids. And by the time we sort of, were focused, it just didn't happen. And as the years passed, I started to feel like, man, I, really missed something there by not having children. But then 16 years ago, I ended up going to Haiti after the earthquake and got involved with an orphanage down there. And one thing led to another. And it's a long story that I don't want to bore you with, but I ended up inheriting an orphanage that I was working at. And I have been running that orphanage ever since and go there every month for the last 16 years. And I have well over 100 children who have come through. And we have 22 of them up here who are either in college or in medical school now, or some have got medical care. And we have a little 3-year-old daughter now that we adopted from Haiti. And none of that would have happened, I don't think, if I had had kids the first time around, because I would have been involved with that. I wouldn't have gone to Haiti in the first place, and probably just wouldn't have had time to do it. So I got this incredible opportunity, but it's only because I learned from my mistake earlier how much I appreciated children. And in fact, today, as we're speaking, we took our little girl to school for the first time. Today was her first day of school. And I got to live that, and it's like, wow, at my age, I get to take a little girl to school.
Amazing.
Get to hug her, and she grabbed me. She said, "I don't want to go," and all that, And I of course, I'm taking pictures of all of this because you appreciate, this now. Like, I'm going to need this later, and so to have that opportunity is a miracle. But I don't think it would have happened if I hadn't made the first mistake. So that's just one silly example of my personal life. But I think everybody probably has something in their life that they can look at that way.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I mean, what a gift. What a gift you've been given with that orphanage, and what a gift you've been able to give. Like, the gift is always, sometimes we think we're doing something, and really the gift is ours to take and enjoy. I mean, that is such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you personally, with all your iterations in your life, like now we're finding out you were a musician also, or I'm finding out anyway. And deep down, I do believe one day you will become a ballerino. On a personal level, your evolution and your creative evolution, how has that impacted your life? Like, because you obviously know that you have the capabilities to do all these different sorts of things. And I would imagine that adds a lot of personal, I don't want to say confidence, because it's more than that. It's like there's such value in everything that you're doing. How does that impact you?
Well, I have had a lot of iterations to my life. When I was younger, I was all about ambition and was all about achievement and accomplishment. I rose very quickly, and first I was a musician and I failed. So my first experience was failure. And then I moved into writing and journalism and got into sports writing, and I had the opposite. I had like a really fast ascension, and I became a lead columnist at the Detroit newspaper when I was 25, and was traveling around the world and covering sports stories and writing sports books and everything. I was on ESPN multiple times. I worked like 120 hours a week and went pedal to the metal, whatever it is, until I was about 37. And that's when I encountered Morrie, and sort of everything kind of screeched to a halt. And he kind of really opened my eyes. He was really somebody that I loved when I was younger and had totally forgotten about. And not forgotten in my brain, but just had paid no attention to because I was so busy. And now here he was dying. And every Tuesday, it was like hitting the brakes on my life, and no phones, no anything. And we would just sit there, and I felt like I was a student again. I felt like I was back in college, and I was sort of reminded, like, wow, you really have changed. You're not the same person that you used to be when you were listening to him, and not necessarily for the better. And I ended up writing that book. And as I told you a little earlier, it kind of took me over, not the other way around. And I, whether like it or not, I became a person that people started coming to and asking, sometimes people would say, Morrie, what do you, and I go, whoa, I'm not Morrie. I'm the stupid one. I'm the one on the other side of the
Right.
couch. But people do that all the time still. And so, and when you start hearing grieving stories and you're going to hospice and you're on the board of hospice and you're going to funeral parlors and you're asked to speak at, people's memorials and you start to change and you become sensitized. And so then I started to realize that I had an obligation maybe to bring that kind of thing to my work. And that writing about games and who's making a tackle or whatever is all well and good. But you might be able to do something else. And I remember Morrie said to me one time, "What do you do for your community?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "What do you do for charities for people who are in need?" I said, "I write checks." And he said, "Well, anybody can write a check, but you've been given a voice and you need to do something with that voice more than just aggrandize yourself." I remember that because, only a professor uses a word like aggrandize, and I've never forgotten that, that really stays with me. And so I had that part of my life where I started to say, well, okay, you've been given this platform and you've been given this success. What are you going to do with it? You just go buy a bigger car, or are you going to try to help people? And, when I got involved, particularly with Haiti, I'm very involved here in Detroit, also where I live, with the city here, and I started and operate a number of charities here. But I think when I got involved in Haiti with the orphanage, that became this whole other chapter of my life, where suddenly my life was about kids and their illnesses. And I mean, believe me, Chelsea, I could spend 10 straight hours telling you about scabies and childhood malnutrition and brain disease and cerebral palsy and all kinds of issues that our kids have that nobody pays any attention. There's no food for them. There's no water. There's no electricity, and trying to I'm trying to figure out how I can get diesel fuel for less than $20 a gallon. When someone's calling me and saying we're making a movie out of your book, and it's like this completely different sort of worlds, that I have to sort of navigate between. And now I'm talking to you, so I've learned that life can be a lot of different things. And you can be a lot of different things yourself. And like I said to you, I was anxious to speak to you because I admire the fact that you've done a lot of things yourself and you haven't let people tell you, no, you're this. I remember I got a chance to meet Maya Angelou once, and she and I were just talking in the hallway. And I said, "Can I ask you a question? It's going to seem really weird." She said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, you write poetry, you write fiction, you've been an actress, you've done all this stuff. Has anyone ever told you just stay with one thing?" And she said, "Yes, and it's the cruelest thing you can ever say to somebody." And I said, "Well, why do you say that?" She said, "Because it's telling a bird that it shouldn't fly." And I thought that was really beautiful. And she said, "Don't ever let anybody tell a bird that it can't fly." And so I've tried to sort of live my life that way and not worry about the category that I'm in. But if I feel like I have something to contribute or something to offer in some way, or I can help somebody, or I can write something, and whether it be a book or a movie or whatever that's going to, have some positive effect, I should do it, whether I'm supposed to do it or not.
And are you injecting yourself into these books that you write? Like, is there a part of you that's in this book twice that is part of the main character?
Oh yeah, Alfie. This character is named Alfie. He's the boy, and many of the mishaps that he has when he's younger with girls are straight out of my playbook. There's a scene where he goes up to talk to a girl who he has a bit of a crush on, and he talks with his hands and he knocks a glass of milk into her lap, and she just looks up and says, "Oh God," like that with that, and his response is, "Look at that." And that's exactly what happened to me and exactly what I said. And then I just skunked off and never talked to that girl again. So, yeah, I think you have to have a little bit, of yourself in order to know your characters well and have them ring true. There has to be a bit of you in there. But the biggest thing is that I wrote it for my wife. And the love story is between Alfie and this girl, Gianna, who he meets when they're very young. in Africa, and then never sees her again until he happens to run into her, when they're college age, and he just kind of tumbles into love with her and feels that like he's so lucky to have her, and finally she loves him back, and they have this wonderful love affair for a while until something happens, and he misreads the situation, and he's tempted to just undo it out of anger or whatever, and of course he finds out that the one caveat to his power is love, that he can do anything twice except love. He can't get somebody to love him twice. So, which I think, that's kind of how it should be. Like you don't get, if somebody truly loves you and you say, all right, you wait over here, keep loving me. I'm going to go out here and see if I can find something better. But just in case I want to come back, pick up where we left off. That seems so unfair. And so I made the rules, like you asked me before about the rules. Well, I can make the rules. I wrote the book. So I said, it doesn't work with love. And if you walk away from a true love, that person can never love you again. They'll be in the world, that you revisit. They can be your friend, but they can never love you again. And of course, he makes this fateful decision, and then he has to live with the consequences. And so it was my way of sort of saying to my wife, both apologizing for any things that I've done that have been less than
satisfactory.
Great, but also, yeah. I went for great, you went for satisfactory, but okay, it's somewhere in the middle.
Right. It also begs the question, which is so beautiful, is if you don't get somebody to love you twice, what will you do to be able to just continue to love them?
That's right. And that's where our hero manages to salvage himself. I'm trying not to tell the whole story.
Right. Yeah, so am I, but, probably failing loudly.
Yeah.
But it's so beautiful. Your writing is so beautiful. It really is. The definition of escapism are your books. Like, I and the reason I love reading so much is something that really takes me away. And every time your writing just does that. So I'm really, really grateful to you. I want to ask you before we have to let you go about what you read and what some of your favorite books are.
Well, I read everything, and I've learned, that story about the photographer, that anything can be a source of inspiration for you. And so I don't ever say, well, I just read fiction because I'm writing fiction, or I just read nonfiction because I'll read, novels, I'll read biographies, I'll read instruction manuals. I mean, anything that I think is going to inspire me. I do tend to read a little differently, like, okay, so this is Ann Tyler's Dinner at the Homesick restaurant, which is just sitting on my desk here. So I don't know if you can see.
Yes.
So you see the pages
Yes.
The dog ears
are all dog-eared, okay? And under each of those dog-eared pages will be a phrase that I will circle that I think is really great writing. And then what happens is I'll just pull these, that's why it's here, I'll just pull these books out. And whenever I'm going to start writing, before I do, I take it and I just flip the pages and I just read these great sentences that these authors have written. And Ann Tyler wrote a lot of really good sentences in this book. And they just inspire me. It's a little bit like, I'm going to sit down and compose music. Let me listen to something that's really inspiring first, and then I'll sit down and I'll compose mine, So I destroy my books. But I'm good with that. Like, I've had people come up with Tuesdays with Morrie's that honestly, I don't know how the binding is even holding together. That they're dog-eared, they're marked up there. They've got coloring all over them. Some of them have little tabs on the pages. 5 People You Meet in Heaven's like that a lot. Little Liars like, and these are people who like underline the books, and they come up and they apologize. They say, "I'm sorry that I destroyed the book." I said, "No, why would you apologize? Like, you ate the whole meal."
Right.
You really, you devoured it. Look at what you did to the book. As someone who comes up and the book is pristine, for all I know, they read the jacket, So I love that. And I don't consider, books like holy that you can't touch them. I think they're meant to be absorbed that way. So that's basically how I read. I just read for inspirational writing.
And do you have any favorite books?
Many.
Have you ever read Circe by Madeline Miller?
No, you're the second person that's recommended that to me in about a week.
there's some similarities between your writing and her writing. She packs a punch with sentences also. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. But what are some of your favorites?
Gilead by Marilyn Robinson is one of my favorite books ever. History of Love by Nicole Krauss. These are books that I've read like 100 times, just because I so admire the writing. I was a huge Tom Wolfe fan. I think the first chapter of The Right Stuff is one of the most creative ways of writing. When I was first getting into writing, coming out of music, one of the daunting things about writing to a musician is it feels very limiting. When you're used to, you got a whole keyboard. I'm a piano player, and when you have a whole keyboard to work with and all the sounds, it feels like the whole world is at your fingertips that you could create. And then when you're working in the world of letters and words and sentences, not so much, especially when you're not as good at it when you begin, you're getting started. It feels kind of, I'm just living within the words to the left and the words on the right, and they're kind of creating a box. And then you read that chapter where there's like italic, ta 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 ta, and he writes it out and the sounds. And I remember reading that, and I said, wow, you can do that with words. You can create sounds, and you can create what people are thinking, and you can come in with a voice out of left field that's just commenting on what you just read, and then you can jump back out again. And it really inspired me to say there is no limit to what you could do with words. And I ended up kind of using that in my journalism in my early days as a sports writer. I would say, I wrote a column, and I would always not be limited by the traditional form of writing. So one time I had to write a story about the Kentucky Derby, and I didn't know anything about horse racing. I was going to the Kentucky Derby, and so I kind of wrote a column about me interviewing a horse, and a make-believe horse, and the horse would talk to me about, and I was asking him different questions about what it's like to be a racehorse. And I remember, and these were the days when people used to write you letters, at the newspaper. And I went down, picked up my mail, and there was a letter from a reader, and I opened it up, and it was that column. And I opened it, I pulled it out, he literally cut it out of the paper, and he wrote, "A horse talks to a jackass." Well, I said, that's pretty good, and I put that up on my bulletin board and said, this is what happens when you take a chance. But it still was worth it, to explore the.
Yeah. I like the idea of not having a framework, and I like the idea of not having parameters, because that's all that we're taught in this world, is that there are limits and there are parameters, and that's why you're told to do the same thing you did well, repeat, which is not exciting for a creative brain. Okay, well, the book is called Twice. It is a love story. It's a beautiful love story, and it's a great book. Another great book from Mitch Albom. Mitch, we appreciate your time today. We'll take callers separately, you and me.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time, for your talk. I loved it. You're very inspiring.
Thank you. Well, I'm really flattered that you like my work. I hope you enjoy 5 People You Meet in Heaven, and I didn't ruin it for you.
Well, yeah, I do know the ending, but I will still read it. And I think there's some books in it.
You only know a piece of the end.
Okay. Great. I'm going to read it on my flight to New York on Friday. And then I'm coming to Detroit. I'm doing shows in Detroit next year. I'm going to invite you guys, you and your wife, to come to see me. Yeah, I'd love to.
That would be wonderful. I'd very much like to meet you in person. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Okay, wonderful. Have a great day, Mitch.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. He's awesome. Fuck.
Awesome. Like a true mensch.
I know. I mean, first of all, a true guy. Like, what a model male human being.
The opposite of toxic masculinity.
I know. Oh, my God. I almost started crying twice.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Like really powerful.
It's
and
just
so glad we got to
through
the kids.
In his writing, too.
Yeah. I'm so glad we got to his kids in Haiti. And I didn't know they adopted.
I know. It's just gorgeous. They're just stories. Beautiful. It's like he's a vessel.
Truly. I mean, it is like, just like hearing about his life.
Is that the right word? Vessel?
But like a conduit.
Conduit, yeah.
Yeah, you do hear that when he's like, I was focused on myself and I made this change. I did this thing to help someone else. And then all of these blessings came to him, but then he continued to pass it along. I mean, just really wonderful. Now I got to read The Little Liar.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to take some callers without Mitch. Catherine? I thought our time was better spent with Mitch, listening to him talk about writing for some reason. And so let's take the callers ourselves.
I think that's perfect.
Yes.
Well, our first question comes from Karen. She says, "Hello, Chelsea. Many of your stories resonate with me. I was adopted at birth and grew up with deep feelings of abandonment. I was also an angry teenager and turned that anger onto my parents. Poor them. My issues followed me through college. In my early 20s, my aunt connected me with a fantastic therapist and I had a breakthrough of sorts. However, I was still searching and ungrounded. I tried marriage to fix my issues and immediately recognized my mistake. I now call that my starter marriage. In my early 30s, I remarried, had my daughter, and found my birth parents. The discovery of these new relationships brought turmoil, but also emotional connection that had previously been just beyond my reach. There have been many twists and turns in my life, many of which have seemed faded, such as connecting with my second husband in 1998 after near misses in which we'd nearly crossed paths many times. I'm currently trying to write a book to capture my life story, which I think is worth telling. I have initiated the process countless times and can't seem to get started. I know you've written multiple books, so my question to you is, how did you start? Did you develop a framework and then start writing? Did you just free flow? Did you have a ghostwriter? I'd appreciate any guidance you can offer. Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. I like your full blonde hair. It looks nice and
got a great
thick.
head of hair.
From another blonde, I mean, mine's obviously not real anymore, but it's very hard to have thick blonde hair.
Thank you.
So congrats on that feat. Thank you for your note. I think for writing, we just had Mitch Albom on talking about his writing. So he talked about getting up every morning. He doesn't expose himself. I don't know. Do you have a job? Or
I do.
Okay.
I'm a graduate nursing professor.
Okay. What does that mean?
So I'm a nurse practitioner. So I'm clinical faculty for master's prepared nurses that are going for their nurse practitioner.
Oh, wow. That sounds nice.
It's amazing.
And so what is your schedule like?
So I'm mostly online grading and I do site visits. So I have a lot of flexibility.
Great. So then what he said, as first thing in the morning is when your brain is the freshest. There's lots of data to back this up. So that's really what you want to do. Is he told me something that I don't do, which is not check any media, not check phone, not check anything. And he just goes and starts writing before anything can kind of make an impression on him. So, and writes for about 2.5, 3 hours each morning and then leaves it there because he said he could sit there for another 8 hours and it just would be useless. And I find that to be true in my own experience as well. It's first thing in the morning when my eyes are fresh and when my head is fresh and I'm well rested to get up. And that is, I think, the most creative time for most of us. I think not looking at anything, not looking at the news, not looking at any social media, not even looking at your phone is really a great piece of advice that he gave. So, yeah, I would say to do that. And I wouldn't be too strict with your guidelines for yourself because the desire's there and the construct, you just have to envision what you're trying to put out there. Like with my most recent book, my goal was to impart the wisdom that I had gleaned and to inject women with a little bit more confidence. Like that was my MO. So everything that was born out of that idea. And so like, I opened my last book with a chapter about, it's called Little Girl. It's like, who I wanted to be when I was a little girl. How did I envision myself becoming and what kind of woman did I see myself becoming? And then the book takes you through all of the ways in which I attempted and got derailed or wasn't really conscious about it and was derailed and then realized, wait a second, where's that woman? So that was like my through line. I don't know that, I think sometimes you have a structure in your head and sometimes you have a structure on paper. It really depends what kind of brain you have. You're talking about writing your life story, basically, right?
Right, yeah.
And I think it's important and valuable to think about what it is you're giving to the readers that are going to be reading this.
So I get a little confused about that. So I think I want to tell my story and then I think about, do I need to make it a larger picture of maybe, my extended family and then intertwine my thread throughout it, and I get caught in the weeds or I think too large. It's really hard to figure out how to start and what to tell. And then I just kind of, I spin around and around.
One tool that might be helpful is to get yourself a pack of like 3x5 note cards and go through, write on each one sort of like a story or a scene that you want to write about. And, you might hang them up on a wall, you might just have them in a stack. But if you're having a writing day, whether that's, you have a couple hours in the morning or even just, 45 minutes in the morning, go through, pick one that's speaking to you that day and write about that. Like you don't necessarily have to write it chronologically. You can always go back and then, put stuff chronologically and weave it in. So you can just go to whatever like you're in the mood for or whatever is speaking to you that day.
That's a great idea because when I'm thinking of a timeline and starting at childhood, I can't think of any great meat to, grab onto and initiate that story. And I've always been kind of thinking about it in a chronological manner. And so I get stuck on that. And then I'm like, oh, well, so that's a great idea.
Yeah. And also those index cards that you get, there's big, the momentous moments or the moments that you do want to write about, right? You put those all down, like the things that stand out the most. So like your early childhood, you're saying there's some, you don't have a very clear idea of where to begin. I think if you put down your biggest memories and your loudest moments on blue cards, that will kind of help you remember where, like, it will kind of help trigger you where to begin. Because if you start writing that stuff, usually writing begets more writings and memory seeking begets more memories. So I think that like just by the practice of writing down the things that you do recall and the big instances that you do want to convey in your book, you're going to start to remember other things.
Oh, that's really great. That I hadn't even tried that. I hadn't even thought about that. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you're writing, say 1,000 words a day, at the end of 3 months, you've got 90,000 words, so it like take it in small bites if you need to.
Yeah. And I also really just like, I'm not a very structured person. I like to just do my own thing. I don't follow rules well. So for me, it's really when I sit down and I start writing, it creates a need to want to write more. And another great piece of advice Mitch Albom just gave was he always leaves his writing on a positive note or a positive paragraph. Like if he's in the middle of a good paragraph, he'll stop if it's been 2.5 or 3 hours, because that way the next morning when he wakes up, there's a level of excitement to return to the page.
Yeah.
That's really, really helpful too.
Yeah.
These things, I'm so structured and organized that everything you're saying to me really, isn't anything I've thought about. And I think probably will help get the ball rolling, actually.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Just don't be so regimented about it. And allow yourself to be a free thinker with regard to this book. Like, do things you haven't done before. Since you've never written a book before, this is the perfect opportunity to try to loosen your whole structure up.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you so much.
Great. Love it. Thanks for calling in.
So this caller is Jean. She says, Dear Chelsea, I listen to your podcast religiously and find your advice to be so refreshingly honest and straightforward. I'm writing to you as a fellow author. I've published many books in my life, but now I'm writing a memoir about being in a family of 10. My early childhood trauma was so bad it manifested in medical issues, so I had to cut ties with my family. I'm writing this book to challenge myself as a writer, process my experiences, and share my stories with others who can relate. I know I'll need to change the names of family members, but anyone who knows me will know who I'm writing about. Even though my stories aren't pleasant, they are all true. How do I deal with the fallout and maintain my conviction and composure should one of them reach out to me, especially if it's in anger? Thank you in advance for your help. You're one of the smartest, sweetest, strongest women I know. Jean.
Hi, Jean. Hi.
Hi, I'm so excited to meet you.
Oh, thank you for your kind words. And I'm so sorry that you had such a traumatizing childhood.
Thank you.
Are you writing it as nonfiction or are you writing it like as fiction?
No, I'm writing it as nonfiction memoir. Yeah.
I honestly, it's not really your problem what anybody thinks about what you're going to write about. You're entitled to write your story. Everyone is entitled to tell their story and write their story. And while you do have to change the names and you have to change the scenery, yes, you're right. People are going to know what you're talking about. But I don't think it does you any good to really consider that aspect of things, especially at this stage. It's almost like, your efforts should just be going towards your honoring your story, because by telling your story, you are helping so many people. And you just have to keep that in the back of your mind at all times, that this is not just for you, this is for the world.
Right.
And it's for women. I like to always think like when I'm making a decision, that I'm doing it on behalf of women. Not every little decision, but big decisions. I think, who am I doing this for? Can't just be for me, but it's for women.
Absolutely. And that's the only reason I would share it, Chelsea. I feel very strongly about gleaning from my life experiences in my work as a writer. I'm almost 60 years old. Like, this is how I want to spend the rest of my working days, is sharing my stories with people who can relate. But, I am concerned about any potential negative interference from siblings when it does come out. I have had siblings try to sabotage some of my book events and whatnot, and that those books had nothing to do with them. So that kind of just hangs over my head a little bit. And I'm just wondering what should I do? Like, how do I respond if, and when that happens?
I don't think there is a response for that. Like, any response is them winning, like them trying to like sabotage you and you reacting to it is them affecting you. And I think you have to just kind of, it sounds like a pretty toxic situation that you've come from. And I honestly think you just have to be your own best protector and think of that little girl that you were that wasn't protected, that you're writing about. And this is your job to protect her in this moment.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. And yeah, I mean, I am trying to listen to other memoirists who have gone through something similar and get their advice and what to do and what not. And so I'm leaning on people like yourself too. You've written your own memoirs and your own experiences. And so I'm leaning on all of you as inspiration for not just how to write this, but how to deal with any intrusions, any negativity when this book hopefully is out and will be discussed.
Yeah. And also, you can't fight with someone who's not fighting back. So say the worst case scenario, someone walks into one of your book events, you're having a book talk at a bookstore, an independent bookseller, and someone comes in and is like, this is a lie, this is a lie. Your response is nothing. Is just to sit there and wait for security to escort them out. There's no argument to be had. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a louder argument than an argument.
Yeah.
To not get into it. And I think it's not helpful to be putting your energy towards that right now anyway. Channel that energy and use that for the book.
Yeah.
Under the assumption that there's not going to be any problem and there's going to be no intrusions and that nobody's going to try to sabotage you.
I hope not, because the way I look at it is like me walking into their office where they work and telling them, that's not how to design a building or whatever they do for a living.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel about it. But how I feel is usually at odds with the people I grew up with, unfortunately. So I hope I can maintain my composure.
You can, because by the time the book is published, you're going to get into a preparation phase. You're going to prepare yourself for what happens in the eventuality that something negative like that does happen. It most likely won't. But if it does, then you're going to meditate on it and you're going to prepare for that and how you're going to handle it. And you're going to handle it with grace and confidence, knowing that this is your story and nobody owns your story the way that you do.
Thank you. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I don't want to hurt anybody. It's not my intention.
No, I understand.
So I wrestle with that a lot. These are not people I want to hurt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's worth saying, in the book also. You know?
Yeah, it's a hard line.
I mean, that's worth considering putting in, the prologue or the introduction to the book. This is my story. And I did not set out to hurt anyone else with telling my story. I'm setting out to help people who may have experienced something similar.
That's perfect. Thank you. That's fabulous. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Well, I wish you lots of luck.
Yeah. And lots of courage.
And lots of success.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I just love what you do. Keep doing it. I love you so much.
Thank you. Oh, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was your episode of Dear Chelsea for the week, everybody. We have mini-sodes that we are airing now. When do our mini-sodes come out, Catherine?
Every other Friday, Chelsea.
Every other Friday, we have a mini-sode. If you need a little jolt, an extra jolt of us, we're here. We're here. And yeah, we'll see you next week, or you'll hear us, or what the fuck ever. Goodbye.
The word of the week is aggrandize. Verb, to increase the power, status, or wealth of something or someone. Used in a sentence, to self-aggrandize may be beneficial if you use it to demand a raise at work. Aggrandize.